Imagine waiting 2 weeks to know if you got a like or not, or a thumbs up. In the decades before the internet, people made comics, and we reached out to each other. What was it like? This is the Sequential Artists Workshop, and these are the 90s mini comics oral history archives. Come join us as we take a longer look at those analog days when communication was a lot slower, maybe more deliberate, maybe more reckless. Who knows? It was just different. Join us as we take a look and really notice how much things have changed. Come join us on the socials. Sometimes it's Comics Workshop, sometimes it's Saw Comics. Either way, come check us out and welcome. Hi, welcome. This is Tom Hart. We're really honored to feature Craig Thompson. Craig is arguably one of the best cartoonists of his generation. In addition to have sold tons of books, he's also got a beautiful way with words and pictures and has garnered the appreciation of hundreds and thousands of people, including a lot of artists. So it's wonderful to sit down with him, and it was really kind of a shock to hear him name me as one of his early inspirations, and that's very kind. And Craig also expands the web by mentioning some other people at the end of this interview that we should be contacting. But more importantly, I want to talk about how that web expanded, because we went to a little, not only out of the way, but sort of secret cafe in Providence, Rhode Island, to film this interview. It's surrounded by artist lofts, some of the surviving ones in 2025. And hadn't even started yet, and we're filming outside, and a woman came up to us and was interested. And we had her ask the questions because she was interested in what we were doing. And by the tail end of this interview, and especially after the interview, we realized that Claire was deeply interested in these values, so much so that she was probably living them more than Craig or I. She and her partner, Femi, who also appeared for a few moments in the interview, have a art studio nearby where they host events and have art shows. And Claire, for instance, hates Instagram, had some things to say about the soothing scrolling that is hurting her generation. And way more interestingly, the way you find out about events in their art studio is you have to call their landline, which is a rotary phone. And so we were really happy to connect with artists almost half our age who really believed in the value of face-to-face contact and walking across town or walking from town to town and reaching out the slow way and the mindful way, if also the cumbersome way. And we were really honored to be speaking with them. It's in the interest of connecting all these generations that these oral histories have been started and preserved. So I want to thank Claire and Femi, and I also want to thank Craig for sitting down with us, and thank what's left of the really interesting parts of Providence, Rhode Island for being there, and the secret cafe, and everything else. Have a listen. This is a fun interview. Thank you.
Okay, please state your name, the date, and where you're reporting from.
All right. Hey, Claire. My name is Craig Thompson. The date is, I should know this, it's the 4th of April 2025, recording in Providence, Rhode Island. What is the name of this awesome coffee shop?
It's May, not April.
I say, I've been touring, so I forget that it's May already.
Speed.
Let's start over then.
Fuller's Speed Shop.
My name is Fuller's?
This is Fuller's Speed Shop.
Okay, here we go. Take 2. My name is Craig Thompson. It is the 4th of May 2025. I'm in Providence, Rhode Island, with Tom Hart and Claire outside of Fuller's Speed Shop because they have coffee and bicycles.
And bread.
And bread, if that's your fuel.
What are some comics publications that you created or were part of in the pre-internet?
Okay, so before the internet, in the 1990s, I did many comics. My friend Joey's Legs. My first was Two-Way Cartoon Machine with Kurt Fredrickson and Kurt Halsey. Then my friend Joey's Legs, Bible Doodles, Kissy Poo Garden. Those are a few. Maybe more will come to mind. And yeah.
Some publications that you created.
That was it.
There was a bunch more. I felt like I was always contributing to people's like little anthologies and stuff.
Neat.
Do you remember any of those anthologies?
One was Brian Kelly Hahn. It was called, what was the name of this? It was about jobs. It was about terrible jobs.
Awesome.
I don't remember the title right now.
Important coverage.
Yes.
Where did you work from in the 80s and 90s?
80s. Oh, you know what? We could go back farther to the 80s. My mom had a mimeograph machine in her bedroom. She had a sewing machine, a typewriter, and a mimeograph machine, all of which I was obsessed with as a kid.
What is
So
a
I would.
mimeograph?
It was old school reproductive equipment. It was like a rolling drum, and you would put like a carbon paper on there,
Oh,
and then you would draw on this weird carbon paper, and then roll the drum and feed paper through, making reproductions. So my earliest like homemade comics were reproduced on the mimeograph, and then I would try to sell them at school for like a dime or a quarter, like really 80s.
yeah.
So that probably planted the seed. And then we also did like a newspaper, my brother and I. We would type it and mimeograph it and make copies for everyone in the family. But then in the 90s, I worked at a newspaper, an old school newspaper with a printing press. And there was like downstairs there was a giant full-on old school printing press. Upstairs there was the press room with all the reporters. In between was the design department where I worked. And inside the design department, there's also a small press that did offset small printing for like the brochures and stuff that went into like sort of inserts in newspapers. And so while I was working there as a designer, I did my first mini comics on the offset printer because I got a deep discount. Maybe it was even free. And then when I moved to a real city, I moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I would go to Kinko's, which was, I think they still exist.
Where were you at your mom's? Before Milwaukee?
I lived with my parents in rural Wisconsin, in Marathon County, Wisconsin, in the center of the state. Not much to speak of there. But I do feel lucky that my first real job outside of high school was working at a newspaper when there were still newspapers.
Gorgeous.
Yeah. And I was a delivery van driver initially. So I was delivering newspapers. And there was a dispatch board. So some of the time you were on the phone getting all the angry calls from people that didn't get their newspapers. And then you would call the van saying, like, you need to deliver a newspaper here, here, or here. And then half of the time you were driving the van. But when I was taking calls, I would draw on this dispatch board. And somebody was like, oh, they need someone in the design department. You should apply for that job. So I applied for that job, and then I got my foot in the door in graphic design very, very young, when I was a teenager.
That's so awesome.
And so, yeah, I started making mini comics, didn't know what to do with them. Probably took a while. The first mini comics just kind of sat fallow, but I didn't know how to get them out there. But then when I moved to a city, I started going to like Chicago-based comic book conventions and trading for free with other cartoonists, the indie crowd.
How would you describe your comics work?
Very cute animals. That was my shtick back then. It's very influenced by Tom Hart. Probably Tom Hart, Walt Holcomb, Megan Kelso. Well, actually, all the like '90s mini comics people. Jennifer Daydreamer. Did I mention her already? And also it was, as I'm sure everybody in this archive is talking about, it was also like the '90s DIY punk thing with zines overlapping. So zines were much more popular and well known. There was Comet Bus, there was Dishwasher Pete, there was all the Riot Girl zines. I feel like Megan Kelso's Girl Hero fit quite well in that world. And then some mini comics like Girl Hero got attention.
Were they
from
also advertising like punk shows and stuff?
Yes, for sure. And now I'm remembering, like, when I was in high school, I had zero interest in comic books, but near the end of my high school years, I made a road trip to Minneapolis, which was the closest big city, and it was a very cool city to me. And in the record shops, they had this little area of zines and mini comics, and that's where I was like reintroduced to comics. So like my interest in comics stemmed from the DIY scene. But it wasn't until I lived in the city that I was sort of able to find a way to like distribute them. That's probably a later question, right?
Probably. Let me go into comic production. Tell us how you made your comics, what tools.
So early on, I got those books from the library, like How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, and tried to learn the OG way of drawing stuff. So I was, right from the beginning, I was trying to puzzle my way through a brush. I think I read Will Eisner's sequential art book too. And I tried a nib. I never had any success with a nib because it was too scratchy and aggressive to me. And then I just worked my way through figuring out a brush. That's why I worked with my whole career. But yeah, I think it took me a long time to get a handle on it. But yes, it's always been a watercolor brush dipped in India ink on paper, all analog still, 30 years in. And then throughout that mini comics era, I would go to Kinko's, mostly photocopy places. I mean, if I had a job that had a photocopier, that was a benefit. And when I did go to community college for a year, and we did some zines and like anthologies. We had a group we called Muffin, and we would publish it seemed like it was an annual zine called Muffin. And we would just use the school photocopier. So I forget that was also an intermediate step, that I was able to use the school photocopier to make a lot of little weird zines. A lot of my earliest mini comics were just giveaways for friends, just a thing to put in the mail.
Yeah.
Because I loved making letters. I think letters was my main medium at that time, writing and drawing elaborate letters for people. And then mini comics just gave me an extra thing to pop into a package, along with mixtapes. In high school, I did do some, what do you call it, bedroom rock. I actually found some of those cassette tapes recently and digitized them, and I will never release those to the world. But yeah, I would. I think they're too painful for anyone. But I definitely went through that phase. I think that's an important phase for. I mean, that's what punk rock represents, right? Like, there was a moment in high school where I'm like, you shouldn't consume media, you shouldn't buy and listen to stuff, you should make your own. So that applied to music and it applied to art.
And it can be terrible.
Yes.
It says, how did you ready your comics for print?
How did I ready them? Well, I guess there was a couple layers of photocopy. So I would draw big because, again, I was using these like professional cartoonist handbooks, like How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. So I would draw a large piece of art, take it to Kinko's, shrink it down small, and then using glue sticks, paste those up on 4-page layouts, And I just did the classic mini comic format, which was printer paper, I think we call it now. Typing paper is what we called it then, because people still had typewriters. 8.5 by 11 paper with, 4 pages on both sides. And then like doing double-sided photocopies at Kinko's. Usually late night sessions. For most of us, it was late night sessions because you would know someone at Kinko's who could get you free or discounted copies if you came in when the bosses were away. So almost all of my photocopy sessions, I remember being after hours, like pulling all-nighter. Also, like, that was when you could have a photocopy machine all to yourself. Otherwise, there was other customers getting in the way.
How many did you print of your first comic? And how did that change over time?
I might have printed 50. It's possible I printed 100, and if I printed 100, I still have 80 of them sitting around somewhere. But, I think I would do like a print runs of like around 50. And then, so it started with like going to shows in Chicago, because that was where the comic shows were, and that was like an hour bus ride from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I made the mistake of going to like the mainstream shows first, and then it was a real hassle. Like, I thought like, there's gonna be cool comics here, and there was nothing cool, and it was really hard to find my tribe. But then there was indie shows, and that's where things took off. And most of us at that time just made our homemade comics and then went around the shows trading with others. Like, I want to read your comic, will you trade with one of mine? So it was a barter system. And then, I just bring 20 to the show and I could bring 20 zines home with me then. And then along the way, connected with John Porcellino, who did King Cat Comics, who basically was the hub of the mini comic scene, and still is. He ran a distribution company called Spit and a Half, which had zines, mini comics, and music, 7 inches, cassette tapes, all of that. All the like homemade media was distributed through Spit and a Half, based out of, I think he was somewhere in Illinois, suburbs of Chicago. Elgin, Illinois. And then that's where I started to establish like pen pal friends through comics. I would order a bunch of stuff from his catalog, and if I loved something, I would send a thank you note or a fan letter to that creator along with my own work. And that's how I first met Tom Hart, pen paling. And a lot of the Chicago cartoonists. So like I remember connecting with like Jennifer Daydreamer and Tom Hart specifically. John Lewis was making mini comics, Megan Kelso. Oh boy.
Seattle, to correct.
It was the Seattle scene.
Chicago. But
Did I say Chicago?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I meant Seattle.
All good.
Yeah.
Tell us when you first saw evidence of people making their own comics.
Again, it was those like Chicago indie shows where I finally found those people. They were not at the mainstream shows, or they were pretty hard to find. None of us could afford tables there, and it just wasn't our scene. So it was, yeah. And actually in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I went to art school for 1 semester, and there weren't really people that were interested in comics in the 90s. That wasn't a thing. So I felt like there was 3 different tribes in art school. There was the industrial designers, which I did not relate to at all. Those were the people that are going to make a lot of money, and they seemed like preppy jock types. Then there was the illustrators, which in theory I should have connected with, but I didn't relate to them either because they also had a commercial take on things, and I did not want to illustrate for magazines. And my people were all the fine arts people. And of the fine arts people, probably drawing and printmaking is where I felt like I fit in.
Yeah.
And printmaking, yeah, I loved printmaking, and that was probably the closest corollary to what I wanted to do.
Tell us the story of getting a comic that surprised or inspired you.
Well, again, Tom Hart comes to mind. Although it was his book Hutch Owens Working Hard that was an actually professionally printed comic via the Zurich grant, which was Peter Laird from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm sure many people have name-dropped this grant, but the very famous Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles of the 80s made a couple of cartoonists into millionaires. And one of them started a publishing company called Tundra, and the other started a grant to help self-publishers called the Zurich Grant. And everything that they published, at least at that time, seemed amazing. And this was my favorite book of that era. And it was very punk rock, it was very exuberant, it was very literary and poetic. Yeah. And that was the book that sort of changed my life at the time.
How you doing?
That's cool. Did you ever read an issue of the Fact Sheet 5 in the 80s or 90s?
Yes. So then I moved, when I was 21, I moved to Portland, Oregon, and there was a zine shop there called Reading Frenzy, which was very famous. And in fact, I think Dishwasher Pete worked there, and he was to me like a zine celebrity. I didn't know I would ever meet these famous zinesters. And they carried Fact Sheet 5. That's probably where I first found it. Along with the Spit and a Half catalog that John Porcellino distributed, it was Fact Sheet 5 where you found zines and minis. And hey, you going to join in?
You podcasting?
Yeah, we're talking oral history about pre-internet zines and comics.
Oh, awesome. Pink Noises.
Pink Noises.
Do you know about Pink Noises?
No, do you?
No?
It's a website in the early 90s for like all women experimental electronic musicians.
Amazing.
Oh,
But it was a
Barris.
website.
It was a website.
We're trying to talk about pre-websites.
Not
Pre-website.
Pre-internet.
Facebook, baby.
Oh, well,
We're the oldies.
it was an
Yeah.
old one.
But no, that does
We
sound
got
awesome.
us electric. We could do old style.
Yeah?
Oh yeah, we like ink and paper and
So you're an analog guy too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Film.
Analog and like very old internet guy.
Oh.
Yeah,
Yeah, when the
you
internet
like
was like the.
Yeah.
Are you cartoonist too?
Paper things.
Are you cartoonist too?
I'm not a cartoonist.
No. Okay. Printmaker?
Architect.
Architect. Cool. Awesome.
I'm trying to think of paper zines.
Should we keep going?
Sure. Sorry.
I wonder if I have any examples of any papers.
Oh yeah.
Well, the Risograph one upstairs is a great example.
You know about old paper
The
zines.
pit.
I do. I'm
That's fun.
names of them.
I mean, I grew up in Providence, so there was always this zine scene.
Totally.
And
Yeah, there of
I
course.
just, like,
Fort
as a
Thunder
13-year-old
was the hub of.
Yeah. There would just be like rooms full of people with their zines, and I'd go and just get them and go home and lay them all out. And
Yeah.
rich.
Very cool. Okay. Back on track.
That's what we're trying to revive.
Yeah. You and a handful of other punks. Did you ever order a comic or write to someone as a result of seeing it in Fact Sheet 5,
Oh.
SPCE, Comics FX, or any other analog aggregator?
Yes. Yeah. Completely. I think I answered that already. Should I
yeah.
repeat myself or? Okay. I can move on from that one.
Did you ever advertise one of the above, or was your work reviewed in it?
There was like a word of mouth thing that existed, and then there was the Comics Journal, which was a, quote unquote, literary criticism magazine for comic books in the 90s, coming out of Seattle, and they actually covered a lot of zines and mini comics, and so they helped a lot. When someone like Tom Spurgeon or Kim Thompson would write a review, then you would get some orders, and that was exciting.
Were you not reviewed in Fact Sheet 5 and those places?
No, I think I got some Fact Sheet 5 and some Comics Journal reviews. So yes, thanks for reminding me of the Fact Sheet 5 reviews too. And this was during the like middle 90s when Seth Friedman was running the magazine.
You want to tell us a story of how you met your closest friend or peer in comics?
Yeah, it was at a zine conference in Kansas City. I drove. Well, I guess one of my first friends in comics was Joe Chiapetta, who was based out of Chicago too, and we met at one of those Chicago shows, and we ended up driving cross country to Kansas City together for a zine conference at an art school. And Seth Friedman of Fact Sheet 5 and Ian MacKay of Fugazi and Minor Threat were the two, main hosts of the event. And so it was like that perfect event of the 90s. And it was just like we all stayed up all night, making collaborative jam comics, and everyone I met there at that time, that was like 95 or something like that, I'm still friends with, and we're all still making things. And I have run into Ian MacKay a few more times outside of that event. As you can imagine, he was quite inspirational. And yeah, so everyone I met there, still close to. I'm going to Kansas City in a couple of weeks for my book tour that I'm on right now, and staying with one of those friends from that era. Do you need to get rolling, or are you good? Okay.
I'm my car. Tell us when you felt the most connected in the community, or at least connected, or both.
Oh, that's a really good question. Most connected was the 90s. I think we're all a little bit nostalgic and idealistic about the innocent era of the 90s, which seemed like, maybe it's kept alive at places like Fuller, Speed. What's this place called again?
Speed Shop.
Because, that was like, it felt like a very anti-capitalist era where, like, people were not in it to make money or get famous. We didn't want to accumulate a bunch of material possessions. We just wanted to make art and fight the system. And it felt very supportive.
Should we pause for a second?
So, so that era of the 90s, it was such a small scene, too. That was part of it. It was also, I don't know. In the 90s, it was cool to be poor. I think that went away,
Well, we just fucking hate working.
Yeah, like people didn't want to work then either, but I feel like and maybe it's my projection, but now it seems like people still don't want to work, but they do want to be rich and famous. And none of us wanted to be rich and famous in that era.
No identities.
Because we were anti the system, and we were creating our own media as a response to that, and then I think, because I became a professional, quote unquote, that's where the innocence went away, and I felt like the market became much more money driven and competitive and mean spirited.
Did that have a lot to do with the internet rolling in?
Oh, that's a good question. The internet. Well, I think the internet homogenized culture to some degree.
Subculture, so.
Yeah, and it somehow did feed into the materialism of culture, I think.
I would agree.
Yeah, like people started to focus more on what they didn't have rather than kind of creating their own scene. I don't know. I haven't thought of my feelings yet, but...
Yeah, they're there.
There were so many scenes that were also just like part of early internet, though, that I think that people that didn't make the leap from physical to internet wouldn't even have been aware of how microscopic the scenes on the internet got.
Yeah.
There were so many tiny little forums or web rings and sites and stuff. So it's like a whole, even within the vastness and homogenization of the internet, there's also tiny pockets that you could go into.
Yeah.
It's so separate from the scene and physical culture.
Yeah, when I moved to Portland, Oregon, it was 1996 or something like that, and that's when I started to meet all these early internet type people, and they were very punk rocks, kind of squatting warehouse spaces, and they had these elaborate sort of matrix sort of setups with all these computers and wires everywhere.
You should
And
check out our spot.
it was probably similar to the Fort Thunder. Yeah, your spot. Okay. And it was very collective. It was very early Burning Man people.
Interesting.
And we had art collectives where we did art together and films together and other projects. And I could tell that, the internet at that time was definitely the Wild West sort of thing of DIY people making all that early media. And it seemed very experimental and very anti-capitalist. And
So much room for play.
yeah.
The technology was so much more physical too. It was big, large computers and thick wires and cables everywhere. And now it's just been flashed
invisible.
literally to a thing that can do everything. So
Yeah.
Did you ever do collaborations?
Yeah, all the time. It was very collaborative. Like I said, that first trip to Kansas City, all of us just stayed up all night doing jam comics, as we called them back then. But I think every cartoonist gathering in the 90s involved jam comics, which were just you draw one panel and then hand it off to someone else to draw the next panel.
Do that.
And we kept that alive for a long time. I mean, the results were very mixed and often filthy.
Yeah. But
And yeah,
as they should be.
yeah, exactly. They weren't meant for wide consumption.
how did they
We were just
affect
trying
your...
to surprise and offend each other.
Yeah. How did they affect your work?
They'd show you that things can come together in a very stream of consciousness, organic way. You would just really just worry about one panel at a time. And even with collaborations and many different voices and art styles, it would still sort of in the end come together as a complete narrative. I mean, you were always aiming for that, and you'd be like, wow, how did that work out? Collectively, we just made a story that makes sense with no planning.
I care about that a lot. All right, now for distribution. How did you trade or sell your comics?
I think I answered that, or I think so.
What are some other comics you remember?
Other comics I remember, I've name-dropped Megan Kelso's Girl Hero a few times. I can't remember if that was a Zurich Grant winner or not, too, but it also had a slickness to it. She did it as an oversized magazine, Love and Rockets, and I think she had some sort of connection with Bikini Kill, the Riot Girl band, and so she was able to travel with them or tour with them and sell at their merch table. Does that sound right to you? She was definitely integrated in the Olympia scene.
Well, she went to Evergreen in Olympia.
Oh, so she knew all those folks.
Yeah, anything out after that, I don't really know.
So she had a bigger, cooler outreach than a lot of people, and there was a slickness to what she was doing. So even though I love the photocopy format her comic looked so much cooler than everybody else's because it was oversized and offset printed on newsprint. It wasn't the Kinko's look. So that was a standout.
Were you ever part of any kind of distribution collective like Puppy Toss?
Yeah, I think I was also maybe carried by Puppy Toss, and who else was there? There was a Wow Cool, which was, who ran Wow Cool?
Mark Arsenal.
Yeah, Mark Arsenal. And then there was, Spit and a Half, as I've name dropped a few times.
But you weren't part of a collective.
Oh, no.
Mm-hmm.
No. I guess not.
Mm-hmm.
When I moved to Portland, I was part of this group, as art collective, that we just called Gracie's. It sort of started just as a breakfast club, like the movie, where everybody would bring something on a Sunday, and then we would feed 30 or 40 people.
Whoa.
And it was dumpster diving and all that stuff too. But then we would always come up with projects to do together. Naked Bike Ride was started there. Gracie's Collective started the Naked Bike Ride in Portland, which then became a national thing. And we started that in the 90s. But we would do 20 or 40-hour movies and stuff too. And we'd do jam comics. There weren't a lot of cartoonists in the group, but everybody was creatives. And sometimes all we did was just go, someone would have a car and we could all get to the river to swim in the summer. So it was just one of those perfect, creative spaces. And somehow we didn't spend much money on these amazing, epic brunches on Sundays because everybody just pitched in a little, and it went a long way.
They didn't start locking the dumpsters then.
Yeah. 90s Portland was all about dumpster diving.
What do you not miss about that time?
Well, just general poverty on that level I don't miss, but it wasn't that bad. No, it was actually the apartment I don't miss. I don't miss the chaos of living in low-income housing. All the drug dealers and domestic violence and all that stuff. I don't think as a 50-year-old that I could tolerate some of those conditions now. I feel bad.
That'd be exhausting.
Yeah.
Tell us one or more memory. Smother us with anecdotes.
Okay. What's another great memory of that era? I still feel when I see my cartoonist friends from that era, we still kind of connect on that same way, and we still have the same amount of fun. I remember being on book tour with running into Gabrielle Bell and oh god, I'm trying to remember who was there. We were in Miami Beach of all places for a book festival, and we were at a fancy hotel where there's a swimming pool next to the restaurant, and we were just oh, let's all go swimming. So while everybody else was dining, we took off, got into our underwear and just got swimming. We didn't get kicked out, but I felt oh, this is a very 90s thing to do in the middle of this fancy hotel during a book festival.
Tell us 3 people we should contact for these archives.
Oh, well, I just name-dropped Gabrielle Bell. I don't know if she's in the archives already, but she should definitely be part of this. Who else did I name-drop? Joe Chiapetta, who's... I think he has been interviewed already for this. Let's see. Who else? I mentioned Megan Kelso. Jennifer Daydreamer absolutely has to be in here. She was... I don't know if I emphasized her enough, but she was a huge inspiration. Her very dreamy, stream of consciousness, psychedelic, weird, beautiful comics.
Definitely gonna check her out. Well, that's all.
All right.
Claire, thank you.
Yeah, Claire, thank you.
Craig, thank you. And
thank you, Tom.
Yeah, we'll call that a wrap.
At fuller speed.
I'll hit stop.
Keep swimming naked.
Wait, where's the cursor? Thanks for listening. This is the 80s, 90s pre-internet mini comics oral history archives. This is a project of the Sequential Artists Workshop, or SAW. You can find out more about this project or about the courses we offer, the programs we offer in comics and visual literacy and graphic novels at sawcomics.org. That's SAWCOMICS.org. You can find out how to support this project through the donate button. You can also support us on Patreon at Saw Comics. You can find more of this on our YouTube channel or through various places where you get your podcasts. You can find archives of this at the University of Florida and at our other partner institutions. And waving at you from the past, this is Tom Hart, the director of the Sequential Artist Workshop. Thanks so much for listening.